Good morning and welcome to OT Investigates. In today's episode, I'm going to be attempting to answer the question, what if profiles from the Armies of the Lord of the Rings book had been released in the Armies of the Hobbit book? Now, I'm going to be leaning slightly into the meme that, there was massive power creep and massive rules bloat that occurred in the Armies of the Hobbit. I think maybe slightly overblown, but there's definitely some truth in it. Now, I'm going to be going through a number of profiles today, and to start off with, I sent out once again a poll to you good folks out there. Again, big shout out to the subscribers. Unfortunately, you can only include sort of 4 options and an other on a poll on YouTube. So I picked out sort of the 4 main ones that stood out to me, but there were plenty of others, and I'll flash up a few comments here that are really helpful, especially in narrowing down the field of ones I wanted to look at. So yeah, Faramir and Lurtz are right up there, Golden King of Bracken and Rohan Merry, Gondor Pippin. There are also comments for Gandalf the White, Lurtz, Durburz, people like this who, you could do with a bit of fleshing out. Any of the Ruffian heroes, unfortunately I don't have the book for the Ruffians, so I'm not fully able to do those, but perhaps they could do with a bit of a buff. So let's get right into the profiles. The first profile I'm going to look at is perhaps a little bit of a niche one, but one I think could do with, and actually maybe a faction that could do with a little bit of love, is Arvedui, the last king of Arnor. Now, base in the Armies of the Hobbit, Armies of the Lord of the Rings, he is 80 points, and he has sort of similar stat line to what you can see up on your screens now. What I'm going to suggest is perhaps not a massive buff, but something that maybe fits the theme of Arnor. You've got lots of sort of high defense guys who might be crowding the ball around Malbeth. So I think if we also included, and this is quite a common one, turning Arvedui into a banner for all friendly Arnor models, and, in that line with his standfast and stuff like that from the King of the North, making when that force breaks, extending the banner to 6 inches, even though you might not have enough models to take advantage of that. I still think it's quite themey. And then also I thought I'd include something to help them defend against magic, because they're going to be in that theme. They'll be coming against Angmar, and they really don't have a lot that can defend against that. So I've sort of done a watered down version of the Numenor army bonus, which is where, not army bonus, but a troop bonus where they get resistant to magic if they're in range of certain troops. I said that while Arvedui still has will points remaining, so as soon as will points run out, he'll lose this. All friendly Arnor models within 6 inches gain resistant to magic, and you will see this a couple of more times throughout this. Again, I think this is a nice defense against magic, not super OP, but yeah, a nice thing to have. I think this would merit a little bump in points to Arvedui, maybe 90 up to 100, depending how hard you wanted to push it. But yeah, I'm going to try and stay away from buffing stats and things like that. I'm more interested in looking at rules and things like that. Next one I'm going to look at is Durburz. Similar idea. He's quite a tough guy, quite a sort of dependable model in your army. What I basically wanted to do with him was make him, more of like a brutal leader and someone who prioritizes his survival over everybody else. So the first thing I've said is that he can take a shield. Now, I think this obviously isn't, completely, doesn't completely change the profile, but does bump him up to that D7 and does allow you to shield and strike and things like that. So it would be nice to hold up some bigger heroes. Next thing, similar to with Arvedui, Durburz actually has that, 12-inch standfast, exactly the same as Arvedui. I wanted to give him something just a little bit extra. So I've made the rule brutal leadership, which you can see here. Essentially how it would act is he would be able to sacrifice a friendly model in combat to allow him to sort of use a fate point, as it were. He could use fate after this as well. But yeah, I think that sort of style of brutal leadership, dragging in a friendly model to sacrifice in front of himself, would be really nice. Next profile, and this is the one that I think came to mind straight away when I was thinking about profiles that could need a little bit of love, is Faramir. Now, I've not messed around with the stat line, and I'll go into the reasons for this a little bit later. He keeps his rules, so woodland creature, and is there a captain who still has the courage to do his lord's will? What I've added, and the role I'd sort of want Faramir to take on, is the guy who's going to kind of keep your force together when things start to go wrong. I didn't want to just make him into a beat stick, because I think that's already occupied by, Boromir, Hurin, people like that. I wanted him to be like a sort of guy that's going to keep your army together when things are going wrong, which I think was kind of the role he played, especially in the movies as well. So if your force is broken, Faramir can reroll all courage tests and his standfast becomes 12 inches. So essentially that's just going to keep your army on the board much longer. And with that courage 6 and 3 will, you're really hoping to pass those courage tests. So should be keeping your army on the field. Also, he was really heroic at Osgiliath, key in the defense and obviously in the failed attempt to retake the city. So I've included something. I think Osgiliath veterans are definitely a unit that could use a little bit of love. There's sort of no real place for them as far as I can tell. So just something that, in a themey way would link them to Faramir would be really nice. So they all get Sworn Protector Faramir, a bit like Bodyguard. And he also counts as a banner for Osgiliath veterans. So what you might see is dropping a few into a battle line to get that fight for and those banner rerolls, which would be really nice. Next one, and Mayor will be delighted by this one, hopefully. That's what we aim to do here on the Hobby Breakfast podcast, is Lurtz. Now, Lurtz, I think, has been a little bit of a meme for a while. He got a little bit of buff from last edition, which made him, a bit more powerful. But he needs to be more of a powerhouse than he is already. And there is, it's often commented about Isengard, they don't have that sort of big infantry hero that's going to really get in there and do some damage. So what I've done is I've kept his rules largely the same. His stat line remains the same. I have given him 1 extra point of will. I think you could definitely argue for him going to 3 will, but I didn't want to push the vote too much in this case. I think 2 will is okay, but I think you could definitely make the case for 3 will. Where his rules do start to differ is I've added a few things from the book. Now, in the basic book, he only gets Find the Halflings, which is a really nice rule. Like, for anything with Maelstrom, that's super nice. But I wanted to add a few things. Firstly, I've given him Oblivious to Pain, which lets him ignore a wound on a 6. This is kind of to represent, in that fight with Aragorn where he's taking loads of hits and still going, like, that's hopefully what this is aiming to achieve. Because I didn't want to give him an extra fate because he does die in the films, and that's kind of how it works with those profiles. Like, anybody who dies only gets 1 fate point. Next thing is I wanted to make him stronger against heroes. So, there are loads of ways around you could do this, and I think you could definitely tinker with it depending on how powerful you wanted to make him. But what I've said is when he's in combat with a hero model, he gains +1 to his fight value and may reroll to wound rolls. He would go up to fight 6 specifically against heroes because, he takes on those big heroes in the films. And I think that would be quite good. And the final thing is his bow. It's not a complete meme, but it's not something you're going to take use of very often, especially as it's only an 18-inch bow. Yes, it's a strength 3, but it's still not great. So what I've said is that once per game, a bit like, when he shoots down Boromir, he can declare he's using this ability. This isn't going to come off every time, and sometimes it won't do anything, but I think it does at least give him a bit more of a threat potential. As a result, I'd probably move him up from 90 points to 95 or 100. I think these buffs definitely merit him moving up a bit. You can maybe even argue 105, but I think at least 100 points would be probably appropriate for this one here. Next one is Arathorn, and I think it's a bit tricky with Rangers because obviously it's not a particularly meta list, and I think it maybe shouldn't be. That's obviously one that's up for debate. But currently he just doesn't seem to do a whole lot. Like, he's a reasonably good fighter with that stat line, actually very similar to Arvedui. But yeah, nothing really that special about him. So I want to give him a bit more utility and a bit more of a reason to run him in an army. So I've given him Heroic March, which I think would be nice. I think you need to rely on a lot of maneuverability with that army, so I think dropping March on him is really nice. Also, similar to Arvedui, I've given him Numenorean lineage. Obviously, he's in the line of kings. Aragorn's his son. So as long as he's got will points remaining, all friendly man models in 6 inches gain resistant to magic. This includes him. As soon as he runs out of will, he'll lose that. And the final one is Chieftain of the Dunedain. So the idea of this one is it gives you maybe a reason to run a sort of themey Dunedain list. They're not strictly better or worse than the Rangers, they're just different. But if you were to run a sort of Dunedain list, you would then have everybody within 12 inches gains +1 to their fight value, so they would also go up to fight 5. I was going to have all friendly models, but I realised that automatically made him fight 6. I think that's maybe a bit strong. So yeah, all other friendly Dunedain models. Also, similar to that, if he's in the shooting phase, he makes a shooting attack, then all friendly Dunedain models maybe roll to hit rolls during the shoot phase. So he's kind of just a leader of the Dunedain, and yeah, gives them some nice buffs. Again, I've put 10 points on his price. I think that's probably fair enough. I think these are some fairly strong rules, and even putting in March is probably pretty valuable in and of itself. Now, Golden King of a Bracken. He walked so the Dragon Emperor could run. when you compare him to Dragon Emperor, I think he's just pretty feeble and doesn't really do a lot, especially for 130 points. Fight 4, D5. Yes, he's got a few attacks and wounds, but I don't really see him doing a whole lot. I've left his stat line the same. Again, I'm just looking to kind of add rules and stuff like that in rather than, you know, strictly focus on the competitive side. Left him with Burly and Riches Beyond Renown. What I have given him, though, are 2 rules to sort of buff his banner. So 2 rules that are cumulative with each other, so they would impact each other. So first one is the Wealth of a Bracken. Essentially, this makes his banner go to range 6, 6-inch range. So that's quite common, I think, 6-inch banners, and he can only do this a few times a game. And I think that maybe balances out a little bit, because I think if it was just a flat 6-inch banner, it might be a bit good. And then it can be combined with the Glory of a Bracken, which gives all friendly Harad models in range of his banner +1 fight. I was originally going to have all friendly models, and then I think there might be some OP combos with lots of, you know, fight 4 troops and stuff like that you can drop in and make fight 5. So this is just friendly Harad models within range of his banner game +1 fight. So for like 3 or 4 turns, you could have a 6-inch banner and it'll be giving +1 fight as well some of the time as well, which I think would be really nice. And again, just make that banner a bit more powerful, a bit more impactful on the board. Now, Hama, bless him, least of all Rohan heroes, in my opinion. He just doesn't do a whole lot, and his heroics, he's probably, I think he's probably worse than just a basic captain, to be honest. And like, I can't see any reason to ever take him over Gamling. So what I've added are 2 additional rules to try and, you know, give him a reason to actually be run. He was always very loyal to the king, and I've sort of tried to play into that a little bit here. So in service of the king, once per turn, basically Theoden can use one of his mites if it was his own. I'm not sure how powerful or not powerful that would be. I think you might need a little bit of play testing to fully check it, but I think it's probably okay. It's only 1 mite per turn, so hopefully that's reasonably balanced. The next one is something that his death in the movies wasn't actually that noble, but you know, an ignoble sacrifice didn't really have the same ring to it. So a noble sacrifice. Basically, when another friendly Rohan model would suffer its final wound, you can instead remove Hama as a casualty. If you do, that Rohan model will survive on 1 wound remaining. Obviously, no might, no will, no fate. He will die in their place, basically, and they will remain on 1 wound. If that, I've put a note to myself at the bottom, actually. If that Rohan model would suffer additional wounds in that combat, i.e. if they were sort of overkilled in that combat, they would still suffer those wounds, and they could then still die in that same combat. It doesn't cancel out all wounds from that combat. So the next one, it did fairly well in the poll, actually. Merry had a brandy butt Knight of the Mark. Now, both Merry and Pippin, as far as I can tell, there's no real reason for them to exist. Obviously, Merry gets a bit of a buff with Dernhelm, but what I wanted to do was just find a way to make them more relevant in the game. So for Merry, he was, you know, loyal, and I think especially right at the end of the film when they're at the Black Gate and both him and Pippin do the reckless charge at the end, I wanted to find a way to represent that. So it's put in 2 rules. In a turn in which Merry charges, he gained +1 to both his fight and attack values. So we go to fight 4, 2 attacks. Still only at strength 2, so I don't think it's OP. I think it's absolutely fine. And you can also, he also gets Sworn Protector to the army leader. So again, he's really loyal. Both Theoden and Eowyn very loyal to them. Pippin, I kind of gave the Harleth treatment. Essentially, when he's in combat, he becomes a banner for friendly Gondor warriors, and if he's within 6 inches of Gandalf or Faramir, he passes all courage to Chardamore, which causes terror, because, you know, he's a bit reckless and he's always loyal. So yeah, I think neither of those massively OP, but kind of useful in their own way. The 2 I ummed and ahed about the most were Gandalf the White and, what we'll look at in a second, Balin, King of Moria. Now, for Gandalf, a lot of people put in the comments, obviously, you don't get value for points from him. He's really difficult to use, and especially compared to, you know, your Azogs and Bolgs of this world, you're just not getting the value you want from him. So what I've done here is, in a few different ways, I've tried to buff him up a bit without making him, you know, just this insane death ball that some of the Hobbit heroes have become. First, what I've done is I've given him the Gondor keyword, which means buffs that apply to Gondor will also apply to him, which is quite nice. And I've made him a hero of legend because I think he more than merits that. I think he is one of the most iconic heroes from the films. Addition to that, I've given him heroic defense. Again, for the role, I'm going to explain for him in a second. I think that's the role that sort of suits him most and makes him quite useful. This is where it's going to get more contentious, the special rules and the magic powers I've given him. I'll do the special rules first, and then hopefully that will try and justify a bit why I've given him the magical power that I have done. So I've given him Horse Lord and Expert Rider. I think he kind of deserves that, like gives you a better shot keeping Shadowfax alive, and I think like those two as a pair were so iconic. I think he does deserve both of those things. Next thing is we have the White Wizard that's got to count for something. Basically he's giving everybody within 6 this resistant to magic buff, and they can use his will points to make him resist tests. So even if they're not targeting him, they can still use his will points, including the one from the Staff of Power. Again, what I'm trying to build Gandalf into here is kind of this sort of buffing defensive hero that's going to keep your battle line alive and defended from whatever threats are coming towards them. I've also given him, and I think part of the reason is you're always going to do this anyway, so I just thought it would be nice to give him, an extra point of might. Basically is once per game, instead of casting a spell, he can just cast the channel version of Blinding Light. It's an auto cast and no might or will is needed, because I think you're nearly always doing that with Gandalf anyway, and I think that's just a nice thing to get off. The power I've given him is Fury Gondor, and the reason for this is there were a couple of things suggested. There was this idea that was floating in the comments of a 6-inch banner, which I think is completely legitimate. You could definitely put that in, but I was a little bit wary of kind of making him similar to Boromir and Elessar, because both of those guys already do that 6-inch banner effect. I wanted Gandalf to be slightly different. I wanted him to be more defensive and more about keeping your guys alive and on the battlefield. So, giving him Fury, you could change his 4 of command if you wanted to strictly stick within the rules of what good and evil casters can have. The reason I've given him Fury is if you channel it, it means the guys your guys are getting a 6+ save, and I thought that would be quite nice and quite representative of him keeping them alive and defended, which is perhaps what I was going for here, but that could definitely be swapped out for Aura of Command. So hopefully that makes sense. Final one, and this is my personal favourite, my boy Balin. He just needs a little bit of a buff. I don't think he's underpowered by any stretch, but I think it would just be nice if he had a little bit more flavour to him, because you do have to make some big sacrifices for taking him in your list, and it does kind of cut down on what you can and can't take. So, not messing around with the stat line again or his points value. What I have done though is given him 2 little rules. One that centres around when he's alive, and one that centres around when he dies. I don't think this has really been done before, so hopefully it kind of makes sense. While he's alive, any friendly dwarf model that would be considered trapped counts as being in range of a banner. Now, I'm aware the "we cannot get out there coming" quote comes after he has died, but I thought it was fairly thematic for Balin's expedition. So yeah, if their model is trapped, they count as being in range of a banner. And that's something you can maybe control a bit like in the Dale Erebor Legendary Legion, where if your heroes are trapped, they can call free heroic combats. The next one is the one I'm more interested in. It's Balin's Tomb. So if Balin is slain, you basically put down a 25mm marker, and any friendly or dwarf model within range of that marker becomes fearless and gets +1 to wound. Additionally, they never back away. Okay, so what you might end up with is your last few dwarves making a heroic last stand around Balin's Tomb, which is kind of what I was hoping for thematically from this list. But anyway, hopefully those have made sense. They're by no means perfect. They're sort of the ones that I've sort of workshopped through myself. And if you do have any changes or suggestions, by all means, drop them in the comments below. Thank you for watching. If you've enjoyed this, drop us a like and a subscribe. It always really helps. And yeah, see you for the next one.